Hello and welcome back to the Cole Memo. In case you're wondering why the show is called the Cole Memo, I'm displaying it on screen right now. You can also Google it. If you're listening to this episode and you'd like to watch it, check out the show notes. It'll have a link that will take you to our website, which will show you everywhere where this episode and podcast stream. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Patreon, the video version of it. You can also just go to colememo.com/YouTube. Today's show is going to be awesome. We're sitting down with Dusty Shroyer, the former president and COO of Chicago-based Revolution Global, a multi-state cannabis operator, which, you guessed it, they're Chicago-based, so they've got operations here in the state of Illinois. I believe they're also in Arkansas and Florida. We're going to be talking to Dusty about how he fell in love with the cannabis plant, how he got involved with it professionally, and what he does today, because, as I mentioned, he is the former president and COO of Revolution Global. It's going to be an awesome episode. I want to remind you all that you can stream my mini documentary now, absolutely free, at colememo.com/minidoc. Here's what you can expect.
Beginning January 1st, 2020, the recreational use of cannabis will be legal in the state of Illinois.
Available to stream now, my mini doc dives into the history of Illinois legalization, starting with
January 1st. What should we expect? The biggest thing that we need people to understand is that January 1, in terms of the criminal justice system here in this state, is the end of prohibition.
see how Illinois missed its chance at real cannabis reform with key failures, including the fact that
the program includes regulation on possession limits.
So people can still be arrested for a possession.
And I want to highlight that in its first year of legalized recreational marijuana in the state of Illinois, they arrested 3 times as many black people for possession than any other race.
We've run into so much cannabis, we've run out of places to put it.
I have represented people and taken their cases through the court system who got charged with more serious crimes only because the police said that they smoked cannabis. And not because the police said you have illegal cannabis, or not because you have too much cannabis, or not because you're high on cannabis, but because I can smell it and that's it.
Attorney goes, he understands that he can't be smoking and his cannabis flower shouldn't be open. And I was like, I'd like to say for the record that I was not smoking and my flower was not open.
So that's where we're at right now in Illinois, and I hope it changes.
Start watching now at colememo.com/minidoc. Once again, you can stream that now at colememo.com/minidoc. It's a culmination of my work over the years, and it's put into a short presentation. I think everybody will enjoy it. Everybody that has seen it has given me really good feedback, so check it out. I hope you find value in it. And if you find value in this episode of the Cole Memo, please don't forget to smash that like button, as the kids say. Share it with your friends, or just leave a comment. That's a great way to support the show. You can also support the show at colememo.com/support. You can become a patron and get access to episodes as they release at colememo.com/Patreon. And without further ado, enjoy this episode of The Cole Memo. How are we doing today, Dustin? I think the last time the last and first times we've ever met each other in person were at Benzinga, I just realized.
I think that's right. Yeah, no, I'm doing great. How are you, Cole?
Doing good. I thought it'd be cool to have you come on, talk about your past in cannabis, because I know that, you've got a lot of experience. You come from Texas, which holds a special place in my heart.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was just trying to think for what reasons, but it's just really the idea of freedom. Again, I know that Texas isn't so free when it comes to cannabis just yet, but I like the idea,
Texas is a real I don't know what it's got some juxtapose, right? Between it's very much so a freedom mentality. You can do whatever you want to do. People love weed. They love cannabis. They smoke a lot of it. But there's also, very conservative portion of Texas with a lot of stigma around things that, were illegal when Ronald Reagan was president. And, that's kind of the vibe there. But generally, outside of the political sphere, people are pretty much like you should be able to do whatever you want to do in Texas. So I think you're picking up on the vibe. That's how it is there, and everybody's friendly, and it's just that one little portion of it that's kind of prehistoric, if you will, or archaic.
Yeah, I have hope it'll be addressed though, maybe in the near future. Like you said, people are coming around. Well, I wanted to display your website. I'll have it in the show notes for our listeners slash viewers. Canthropologist.com. They can also find you on Instagram, _canthropologist. I'll have both of those in the episode description. But I just wanted to give you the space to introduce yourself, tell us about your upbringing, how you got interested in cannabis, how you got into the cannabis industry, and what the experiences has been like. So,
Whew.
I know that that's a lot, but let's just start with like having you introduce yourself. And yeah, you started, you were born in Texas? Is that
I was born in Texas, but not I grew up in two places simultaneously. So and the other part of where I grew up kind of is a big part of that story. So my mother, when I was real young, moved to Eugene, Oregon to finish her degree, her college degree. She went to the U of O. And my dad stayed in Texas, and a lot of my family was in Texas. So I kind of always went back and forth between Eugene, Oregon to LaGrange, Texas, two of the most opposite places on earth, I think that my entire childhood is very reflective of where we're currently at, like, as a nation, like that's how different the two places I were growing up, one's very blue, one's very red. I'm, because of that, I had insights into really high quality weed that my friends didn't have, because most of the cannabis when I was growing up in the 90s was brickweed, right? It all came from down south. It came over the border. It was real cheap, 25 to 50 bucks an ounce. It was, got you high for 20 minutes, made you paranoid, was full of seeds. That was most of the cannabis in Texas at the time, the weed in Texas at the time. Oregon already had an emerging grow scene, right? Texas didn't. So when I go home, there was or go back to visit my mom, there was this little theater called the Bijou Theater, which was kind of like, an independent theater that would show a lot of cool, movies. So they Dazed and Confused aired there when it first came out. And that was kind of, I remember seeing it there and like actually rolling a joint in the movie theater when it was totally illegal, but they were just that chill there.
right?
So I would go to the Bijou, and there would somebody, it was kind of like being in a fish lot. Somebody would walk by you and just say, "Kind bud," and you could, throw them $10 and they'd give you a gram. And so that's how I started buying weed when I was, 15 years old in Oregon, and slowly but surely realized that probably shouldn't be smoking this brick weed and probably should be smoking this better quality weed. And the only way to get it was to grow it, because there wasn't a huge grow scene. There wasn't a huge import scene. We would get, occasionally a little bit of bud would come from Cali, but most of the cannabis and I don't know how it was in Illinois. I imagine it was somewhat similar, where there was occasionally some imports, but usually when we could get our hands on a little bit of really high quality, like US grown bud, it was from a friend, a local grower. And, if you were lucky, you could buy a quarter for $120. So, you can buy an ounce for 25 or a quarter for 120. And when I was about, I think 21, I'd been smoking weed, maybe even younger than that, 2019. I'd been smoking for, 5 years straight, and way too much, because I've, probably, an ounce a day. This like, horrible brick weed. I was just like, I'm done with this. Like, I'm going to find a way to only smoke good shit. Right. Like, this, like, going to kill my lungs. I'm going to, this is not good. So that's when I, started slowly, exclusively buying whatever I could find. So I'd always have some good quality. And then, occasionally you would find a seed in those sacks. So, okay, one point in time, or multiple points in time, those seeds found their way to dirt. But one at one point, sometime I was like, maybe I should keep this growing, right? Like,
Yeah.
not let this die. And there was no grow stores, there was head shops that sold, that they actually built lights at head shops and would, have a small little grow shop as a portion of a head shop. And that's where I bought my first light from, was a grow shop built 430 watt H. For most people haven't heard of a 430. There used to be a 400-watt light, a 600-watt light, but there was actually a 430 that was designed specifically for indoor cultivation. It was one of the first indoor cultivation bulbs. So this head shop was building, it's called the Gas Pipe, still in Austin, Texas. Was, building lights that could run this bulb, building fixtures that could run this bulb. So
It was a big bulb too, right?
it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bulbous bulb.
Yeah.
Pretty big. So I bought that and hung it in my closet, and it was too hot in my closet. My girlfriend and I had to sleep with eye mask on, and we didn't no idea what I was doing. I was reading High Times, trying to learn how to grow, because you couldn't get on the internet. There was no forums at the time, and to my surprise, I grew good weed. It was just like, it wasn't that hard,
hmm
and it grew pretty damn good. And it started to, I kept doing it. And, I bought a slightly bigger light and started teaching my friends how to grow. And eventually, I'd been doing it for a few years, and it,
And when about was this? Are we past the statute of limitations where you can tell me that?
yeah, this is 1999,
Okay, cool. Yeah. So in the 90s. Wow.
it was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I remember the day I planted that seed. The first seed I brought to fruition was like, it was September 20, somewhere between like the 21st and 26th of September. I remember because there used to be a music venue called South Park Meadows in Austin. It was a pretty famous venue, and it's a Walmart now, unfortunately,
Mm.
because the price of land went up so high there. But, and Fish was playing, and so we were driving to see Fish, and before I went to see him, I put the seed in a napkin.
Nice.
That's the seed that got planted. It was out of a bag that I bought from a friend. I didn't know he was growing, and he just comes up to me. He's like, dude, I got something for you. It's out of my personal grow. And it was, I think, a sack of juicy fruit, and it had been pollinated by a hermaphrodite island sweet skunk. And so it was this, just random bag seed of island sweet skunk crossed with juicy fruit. Juicy fruit had this like great kind of like baby poop smell, and the island sweet skunk was probably pretty terpenoline dominant, a lot like it is today. But the offspring was amazing. I mean, it grew like this like pink lemonade, like just, like, you just didn't get weed like that back in the
Yeah.
night. So it was incredible, and it was intriguing, and it was not that complicated, and you just were learning and solving problems, and it was fun. So it just became became obsessed with the hobby. And then around 2000, I think 2003, I thoroughly considered moving to California. I went out there, I looked for houses, I had a lot of friends out there up in Humboldt, and just didn't feel right. In an '06, I got a call that was like, look, I had like 40 friends that had moved to Colorado, and they were like, look, it is going off in Colorado. You need to get up here. So I took their advice. I came up, I checked out, I flew in for the weekend. By the end of the weekend, I had rented a house, was moving there. Within the first month, I consulted a lawyer, created a business, and figured out how to grow 100% legally, full paper trail. Was taking 1099s from grow stores, meaning that they were, letting the IRS know they were writing me checks for cannabis, which was, mind blowing. And built, I guess, like really my first legal cannabis business with a group of friends there called Digital Sun Harvesters. And um our whole mission was just to provide good 100% legal high quality weed in Colorado. And just there was a huge demand for that. There was a lot of dispensaries that had opened up, and they didn't have access all the time to high quality products. So what happens in that relationship early on in Colorado is we just formed like a bond with these shops that wanted our product, wanted product that I would grow. So they would have doctor days, patients would come in, they'd sign patients up, and then they could assign me as that patient's caregiver. And so I could grow for every one of those patients, I could grow 6 plants legally. I would then grow the plants and then sell it to the store. And, the patient would buy from that store at a discount. And so the patient had to deal with the store, I had to deal with the store. It was a beautiful system. And then they regulated weed and everything went crazy, right? So,
Yeah, you
and
were probably just driving your weed to the dispensary back then, right?
I would, well, they still are in Colorado, by the way. I mean, it's
Oh,
still not like, it's you have to do a manifest, but you can still throw it in your trunk and one person can drive it to the store.
nice.
It does not need to be, like 7 armed guards in a military grade vehicle. Like, no, it's still pretty laid back there. They didn't overdo certain regulation. They did a lot of regulation that didn't need to be done, and they underdid a lot of regulation that needed to be done, right? I'm a
Hmm.
proponent of because I've seen what can happen behind the scenes, and I'll tell you that story. But I'm a big proponent of health and safety regulation for consumers. I think that's where it matters the most. I don't think that you need to track plants. I don't think you need to treat, I think that there's a lot of I don't think you need 2 security guards to deliver cannabis. There's much more lucrative trucks on the road than a cannabis truck driving down with a few
Right.
pounds in it, so I think that certain things that drive up cost are overdone, but I think that early on in Colorado, what did not get done was any health and safety regulation, right? There was no testing, there was no labs, there was no knowledge of what pesticides were safe or not safe to use on cannabis. And when they regulated it, they also did something really, really strange. They handed over the keys to producing the product to the stores that had never grown it before. They said you have to be vertically integrated, right? You have to grow all your own product, and you have to have a storefront to sell the product, which automatically said that if you didn't have a store, you had 30 days to do this once they passed the law, right? 30 days to own a store, or your grow's illegal.
Wow.
From a store, 30 days to start to get your own supply, right? So everybody's scrambling. Stores are looking to what we would call marry growers to marry stores to keep it all legal. I was lucky enough to find a store owner that was young, and she wanted to go to graduate school, and she had just gotten into Harvard. So she sold me on, owner financed her business to me. So I was able to buy that, and I was building what I think is the first ever mechanically engineered, architecturally designed grow on the grid. Most grows were built off grid at the time. And I went through the city of Boulder and built this one outright, a permitted grow, built it out 100% correct. It looks like a miniature version of some of the top line grows you see today. And this was back in 2010.
That's cool.
Uh, but what ended up happening was, a lot of people were now growing wheat who didn't have a clue how to grow wheat, right? And there wasn't enough growers to go around that you could hire. No, grower can make, $250,000 in their basement, working 5 hours a week. Who is going to come work for a store?
And one of the big things you said is if they only had 30 days, like just in case people don't grow and don't know, like you can't grow weed in 30 days.
No,
Like
no.
I mean, I wish, right? That'd be pretty cool.
It takes a while, and if you're doing it 100% right, and you've got to pull permits, you got to find a building, pull permits on a building, find a landlord that people don't realize it, how many hurdles we had to jump through back then, but there was a lot more hurdles than you have to jump through now. We're talking full stigma, right? No, like nobody owns buildings and supports legal weed, right? So there was nobody that would rent to you. Every landlord that was cool enough to rent, their spots were already taken. So it became, it was really, really challenging to find real estate. Then you would, need to design everything to spec. Then you need to, have those pull permits, which can take months in building and planning. then you need to build the grow, and then you need to grow the weed. And even if you're starting with cuttings, you're still looking at 6 months to your first harvest. So you're looking at about 18 months from conceptualization of I need to grow to actually having a harvest and bringing in products. So it was
Right.
pretty much an undersupplied market. I was in a good position there because my grow, when they passed the bill, was one of the few. I ended up being I was the first grow that was in operation to get a license from the city of Boulder. So we were the second issued license there. The first issued license went to a company that hadn't even built yet. And so I was built fully growing cannabis and got my license there. So I was the first operational licensed grow in Boulder. Which gave me a little bit of advantage. And also the build gave me a pretty big advantage at the time too, because even after people built out, they forgot to put in like air conditioning like that. So they come the summertime and everybody else's crop would fail, but we had enough
Right.
to cool the whole grow shut like that because we did build it correctly. And nothing else at the time was really built right. So, but what that led to, right? You got people that have never grown before and building grows that don't really support the right environmental conditions for growing cannabis. And what it led to was a bit of what I call the first pandemic, which was a lot of things getting sprayed on plants that should never be consumed, right? They're not even meant for consumption through eating, let alone through smoking. And it led to a lot of, mold, mycotoxins, yeast, the drying and curing conditions were just really subpar. And people would just focus on growing a lot of weed and selling it really, really cheap. And I was focused on growing, organic, high quality product and selling it at an affordable price, right? So I wanted to be 45 bucks an eighth, and my competition was at about 15, and they were just bottoming the market out. It wasn't good. So I sold my business around 2012 because it just didn't feel like a good industry at the time, right? You were competing with a lot of things that are below your own moral and ethical standards to even see go out the door, right? And it wasn't until 2015 when the Denver Fire Department came in and noticed that the pesticide bottles that were on the storage racks in grows around Denver said not for indoor use. It was that wordy, right? Not for indoor use by the fire department, not the entire, the entire regulating body that regulates cannabis.
Right.
A whole other department comes in and says, there's something not right about this. And it tipped them off. And at that point, I think it took a year or two, but they came in and they started, requiring mandatory testing for pesticide and created a allowable pesticide list that banned a lot of these products. And I'd been working, I'd been consulting after the sale of the business in 2012. I also owned a yoga studio, so I was, helping run the yoga studio a little bit. It didn't require my full attention, and I was growing cannabis in my lab, just figuring out how to perfect the process for future, commercial cultivation. I wanted to tighten that up, and I kept getting calls to write applications in, Nevada, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and eventually Illinois hit my plate. And I'd read every law 5 times in every state and realized that Illinois was a great market. It had a few things and I know that there's a lot of triggers around the Illinois market that are justified, right? Like, I mean, it sucks. It's limited license. There's issues with it, right? But if you go back in hindsight to 2015, what the problems were in the space, smoking pesticides, selling mold, like all the problems that were there. Also, the other problems were edibles were not regulated at all. They were horribly inconsistent, right? Hash quality was abysmal because most hash was made from literally sweeping trim off the floor. And none of it was made by the company. The growers grew weed, hash makers made hash, people were very dogmatic in their process, right? It's like, oh no, I only make bubble hash. I only use CO2. I only, I'm only using hydrocarbon or butane. And people thought that was the holy grail. Whatever they did was the holy grail. And Illinois did a few things that were really exciting to me. For one, I'd always wanted a single source business, right? Where it solves those issues, right? Like I'm going to grow the cannabis and I'm going to extract it. So I have full control over quality from the time I plant the plant until I release whatever product it's made from. And that has a huge effect on the quality. It's very hard to make artisanal quality products without having control of the entire supply chain. You can make you can scrub your live resin and clean up the chlorophyll with a little CRC. There's tricks that industrial players can apply. But if you're doing it like the traditional way, it really, really helps to be the grower, to be the hash maker, to be the scientist, to be the breeder. All of these things help. And it was like this perfect opportunity to do that because of the limited license structure of the pilot program. And you were not allowed to wholesale anything. You couldn't to another grower. So you had to process all the material yourself. So everybody had to become an expert in everything. And I had spent my entire life learning about everything already. So I was stoked to come in and like actually finally get to do. It's like being a painter that never had a canvas and now you get your canvas, right? And you're like, oh shit, like I'm gonna try to paint some really cool picture now. So and they did something else that really made me, pack up, sell my house, get rid of my yoga business in Colorado and move to Illinois. And that was this mandatory third-party testing. And to me, that was the holy grail, right? Like, okay, so now nobody's allowed to sell mold. I'm like, I've been competing against black mold and powdery mildew and all this trash for years. You're not allowed to, still to this day, you cannot spray your plants or even put anything on your soil during the flowering stage. And whatever you can put on your plants in the vegetative stage is like beyond FIFRA 25B. And for FIFRA 25B is like minimal risk. That's what the federal government says, this is minimal risk. Well, you're not even allowed to use all FIFRA 25B pesticides in Illinois. It's very, very regulated. And I don't think people realize this, but in a lot of other states, you can spray, maybe not like harmful pesticides, but you can spray your whole crop till harvest. And if you spray neem on a crop through harvest, that's not going to be good weed. I mean, it's just, and it may be, whether or not it's safe, I think the jury's out. So to me, pesticide free is more important than anything when it comes to weed. Mold free is second most important. Would love to smoke organic, but I'll take pesticide free, mold free over anything, and then it's like a privilege to have something organic on top of that. So it was just an amazing market. And when the original founder of Revolution, he didn't have a complete team. He was missing the intellectual property, right? Missing the processes and how to do it. And he recruited me for a few months and was like, I worked on it. I wrote the whole operating plan for Revolution before the licenses dropped. So I did about 50-60% of the overall application, helped to design the grow. And I played a little bit of hard to get, but ultimately I knew that it was like my dream job. So, and my wife was supportive. So we packed up the kids and we moved out here. And I've been having a blast ever since. I just had such a great run with Revolution. It was like super bittersweet walking away, but found 10 years is a long time to spend with the company, and found that my passion for more so than anything, I'd kind of been elevated at the company to the president role. And my passion is for innovation. It's for working with our growers, working with our hash makers, working with, like I want to have my fingers dirty. I want to have dirt underneath my fingernails, and that I needed to be able to innovate and do more. So that's when I launched Canthropologist, and it's, we're here to help everybody grow better weed from the initial seed through the finished products that they're making, help them really create consumables that are going to resonate with the people that are buying them in the store. That's what, that's who we live for every day, really, is that end consumer that's buying the product. We want to make products that blow their minds, and we want to help companies create systems that can create these products in a reliable, so they show up the same every time that they're purchased, so people know what they're getting and know they're gonna and can know the quality is going to meet their expectations. So that's what we're doing now. We can help companies with anything there is, or new startups with anything, from all the way from applications through actually starting up operations. But our passion is to come in and help refine your genetics portfolio. Our passion is to, help you find strains that are going to support your end product goals. Not a lot of companies are thinking like that yet, but if you're going to, there's certain products that are going to show up the best in each type of extract. So if you're doing, a BHO system, we're going to help you find the strains that are going to grow the best for you. They're going to have the best economics for your business, which translates into the best prices for consumers and the most reinvestment back into the business to keep the quality driving up all the time. And ultimately, that's just our goal, is to, increase the quality of cannabis across the nation. Suffering a little bit right now. It's ebb and flowing right now. And we just want to see it, on a steady path upwards, which I think it can happen.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man. Well, damn, it's quite a life you've lived.
Been fun.
Yeah. Like, to have been in weed all the way back in the day. One thing you didn't mention, I'm curious if you saw this. I feel like it was around 2012. Maybe it was about the time you got out of Colorado. But that's about the time when people started doing like the open blasting of like BHO, or at least I don't want to say they started, but it got really popular. I feel, am I correct in that?
Yep. I got a funny story of, it's part of a different topic, but vape innovation's always been super fun, right? Like so I'll lead into this story a little bit
Sure.
if with the how like 20 years ago, I would say was probably around, it was probably the late 90s. I was still flying back and forth from Oregon to Texas, so it was probably, mid to late 90s. And I happened to get a seat by a tobacco executive. And I don't know why, because I'm not talking about weed, of course. I'm not talking about anything like that, right? But this executive chooses to tell me about the smokeless cigarette. And he pulls out like an example of one that looks just like a cigarette, but it's going to be electronic, and you're going to be able to do it anywhere without any smoke.
And you're on a plane, by the way, when this is happening?
I'm on an airplane. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And what is any stoner, back then there was such a huge stigma, right? Like there's such, and like, you're going, hold on a second, I want to put weed in that, right? So from the time like I heard about that in the 90s through the time where I saw the first prototypes drop, which were like the late 00s, right? And like right about about 2009, I think there was the first, I forget what there was called, like a CannaCon. The first big convention was in Colorado, and there were several companies that had some, electronic vape devices then, and they weren't good. They had little cotton balls. I don't know if you remember that, right? And you'd squeeze some oil on a cotton ball, and then you'd put it in there, and then you hit it. But you could get a hit, but it was, probably going to give you a headache and not get you high, and it was weird. But in 2011, a buddy calls me. He owns a dispensary in Denver, and he's like, "Dude, you got to get over here and see this right now. Stop by on your way home." So I leave Boulder. I live in Denver. I'm driving back to home, and I stop by his girl, and he's trying to he's got the first ever cartridge, what would become the 510 thread cartridge, but
Yeah.
one of the first ever cartridges, little tiny plastic hole in this thing, right? Like, I mean, talking, it's smaller than the tip of a pencil. And he had been, he's been open blasting butane Like literally because that was allowed, right? So you of course, like, not only are you allowed to sell mold, the legal regulated market, mold and pesticide, but you don't even need a permit to like let just roll up your garage door and open blast.
Hmm.
Super dangerous. And there was, I don't even think people like, I think purging at the time was like to set your pan of oil in the windowsill under the sun.
Yeah.
No, there was no vacuum ovens used back then.
Or the first way I ever saw it done was like my buddy in a shed, like just put it over a double boiler and was like, all right, if we get it to this temperature, all the gas is just gonna magically disappear. I'm like, I don't trust this, but okay.
Yep.
Anyways,
We probably like blasted it in like a PVC pipe with a
yeah, through a pipe into like a lasagna pan, you know.
nice, nice. Yeah, I remember those days. Absolutely. So anyway, I was like, dude, I got the perfect thing for you.
Mhm.
And um this is kind of completed the puzzle here, but there was 3 CO2 extraction machines in all Colorado at the time. And one was Organolabs, right? And one was, I think they were called Delta 9. And the third was the farm. And the farm was who I ended up selling my business to a year later. But the farm was super picky, right? They were actually like they were one of the most prestigious dispensaries in all of Colorado, right? They were really, really good at their job. They had a great grower. I still respect him to this day. Um, just excellent at what he did. And which is rare for Colorado at the time. There wasn't a lot of like excellent growers, and they were super clean in everything they produced. They just had a lot of integrity. And part of that, led them to having a machine that they had some downtime on, but they wouldn't let anybody run product through it that didn't have their same standards in their cultivation. So it meant that I was literally their only toll processing customer. So I would usually, give them all my trim and they would give me back 50% in CO2. Back at that time, people didn't understand really exactly how to run CO2, but theirs was the highest quality in the market in 2011. And it meant that most batches would come back, a pretty good golden color to light amber, not a dark brown, not sludgy.
Yeah.
Uh, they were doing some inline winterization, which meant that you were decreasing some of the fats and lipids that would be in the end product, and they were retaining terpenes if the input was good enough. So you had this flavorful, pretty purified CO2 oil, which, a lot of people can't run that today. And they were getting it from a machine. Remember, like another part of that is they had to build the machine themselves. There was no there was no professional CO2 companies that would sell to a cannabis company at the time. So they built this thing on their own and they would run my product. So I had 100 syringes of this CO2 oil, which was 1,000 times more easy to work with than BHO sludge, because you couldn't even put the BHO in a syringe because it was
Right.
so at least what the product he had. I'm sure there was some good BHO and some people knew how to extract it a little bit better, have better setups at the time, but he didn't. So so I came back the next day with a syringe of CO2 oil and we married that little hole to the tip of the syringe and filled it up. And that was one of the first carts to ever be made. Took the idea to the farm. They launched their first cart brand and it turned their CO2 sales from about 100K a year to about $1 million a year. So about 1,000% increase in overall moving of this oil type product. So their ability to move their biomass increased drastically. They got frustrated with working with China. All the cart, and people don't realize this, but back then it was about a 50% failure rate on cartridges. In 2015, it was like a 20% failure rate, 20 until C-cell dropped finally in like 2016.
Yeah,
That
C-Cell was like, oh.
totally exactly. They were like they made the cartridge industry what it is today because they actually were the first company that we could really trust to work with. But so the farm walked away from their business, but was Organolabs ended up becoming the biggest vape company in the nation for at least a few years. So they could have been that. You got to have, you got to be diligent about working with with new industries and new technologies, with foreign countries who, do things a little bit different. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to find this meme right now. I can't, but there's like I'm trying to show people like what dabs used to look like for a certain period of time. Like, and I don't even mean to say like that with a broad brush, but do you know what I'm talking about? Like there was a while where like the closest description you could give it, like you said, is sludge. Like sometimes it just looked like sludge, you know?
it's bad. I mean, we were taking, the whole purpose of hash back then was to like try to take, because there was never enough flour to go around.
Mm,
So, you really just had to figure out a way to use up the trim. And so, we made really high quality bubble hash out of trim back then, but not nowhere close to where it is today. Most of the hash, even, solventless, was um, dark amber, charcoal in color. Um, it doesn't need to be light to be high quality,
right.
but because usually that just means the trichomes have turned amber before you run it. It can mean contamination, but meaning that there's more plant matter than you want in the hash, was just going to degrade it. But if you've got you can get a sticky good 70% potency hash that's super dark amber. But it was, BHO was really that secondary way to clean up your leftover trim. And so bad inputs equals bad outputs. Wasn't a great process for BHO at the time either. So, though what shocked me is when we bought the best BHO machine and that you could buy in 2015, and we ran product through it, and I was like, why is this coming out so dark? And so, and I like, oh, there's more. So there's more to it. It's than just, the machine you running your process, the flour quality, the input in the process by which you are preparing that product to be extracted. Every second counts, right? So you're harvesting, you're like, if you harvest, a bunch of apples and you're rough with them and then you make apple juice, that apple juice is going to be, dark brown. Nobody's going to want it. You want clear, nice, crisp, golden apple juice, right? And that's what we want from extract too. So it goes all the, how, every second that you have from the time you harvest to bucking your flour off the stem to what grades of flour go into the bag to getting that bag frozen with minimal friction is the way you're going to get the best concentrate. So there's so much that we had to learn to take it from sludge to where it is today.
Yeah, it's crazy. The other thing you made me think of when you brought up the first vape pens, I like to make the joke that like, you know, again, this is a joke. The kids nowadays have it easy with the vape pens because when I was in high school, that's the joke part. I'm not saying that kids should have it easy with the vape pens, but I'm just saying when I was in high school, we had the first like G pens, and you had to like load that thing like it was a fucking musket. Like, you get a little ball of concentrate and like put it into the pen, and it's not after that it was pretty easy to use and everything, but you had to always make sure you like held it a certain way. You can't like just like hit it like
Right.
the way you hit anything else because it'll like leak into the mouthpiece and stuff. And nowadays you have these C cells that are like, again, we'll get away from my silly joke there. It is crazy how this technology has advanced, you know what I mean? And that pen that I started using, like you said, it wasn't the days of I didn't see the days of the cotton. I had other friends that had like cotton nicotine vapes or whatever, but the vapes I would see were like with the spring. You know what I'm saying? And then
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it
The heating coil looked like a
heating
spring.
coil, bingo. And then
And it's probably wrapped around some quartz, like a little piece of quartz.
I
And
was about to say the really you started to learn the really good ones are the ones that had like ceramic or quartz inside of it to kind of like more flavor. Yeah.
that was a C cell. Was the first before the C cell, right? You had usually a cotton wick. Some were wickless. The first one we launched in Illinois was wickless. Um, but the atomizers, that's the part that heats up the oil. we were still had metal on oil touching, and that they, they would try to buffer the heat by wrapping it around some cord. So that was like, that was an evolution in technology. I mean, I think they used to just wrap the coil right around the cotton wick before that.
Hmm.
And so you're always burning wick. You get wick hits, or dry hits are real nasty. And then Cecil, I believe, was the first company to embed the coil into ceramic. So there's probably still a
Yeah.
little bit of contact in that. And that cartridge, by the way, still works excellent today. And it's hard to beat the original C-cell, but there's a lot of
Hmm.
competition out for it. So prices have come down quite a bit. And there's new ways there's two or three other versions of the ceramic cartridge now where they've improved it. So they've gone from that circular coil to a mesh coil that's a little bit more spread out, and it's not even a coil anymore. It's
Hmm.
just in that mesh, the way it's embedded it gives you more and more even heat and allows them to put in a little more logic to these pens now. Once you move away from the 510, you're going to get your disposables, your AIOs, all-in-one units. Those actually have some intelligence in them that can change the way you could heat oils and bring them up and down. So they're changing the experience even more. And now there's a new flat atomizer out, and that's what you're going to start to see in 2025 is the rollout of what we call postless. And I don't know why it's called postless. It's just because there's not a metal post or a ceramic
Oh,
post going up, right? And so
huh.
you the oil through the window. Obviously, there still has to be some post mechanism
Right.
to get the smoke back up, but it has instead of having a circular ceramic piece, it has a flat piece, and companies are really thinking about how their ceramic is absorbing. They're changing the structures of the ceramic to change the overall how high you have to heat the oil up, so you can heat the oil to a lower temperature and get the same experience, which is, over time, I'm sure you noticed that the throat burn from 2015 to 2024 vapes has thoroughly decreased.
Yeah.
And that's from higher quality oils and higher quality vapes at the same time. And that's going to continue to get better. The innovation's insane that's happening in the hardware um, industry right now. And to a point where I can never imagine not smoking flower for a long period of time ever. I mean, I'm a joint smoker, tried and true, that's just my preference. Um, but man, some of these rosin all-in-ones are, they're
Hmm.
just I don't even like to compare it. Like, is it flat? Like, I just love it. Like, I mean, that's all I could say. Like, do I prefer one over the other? A totally different experience. I love both of those ways of consuming, but I never in my life thought I would tell you I would vape, and let alone love a vape. So,
Yeah. I don't know what there's this reviewer from Illinois that I think is really good, so I'll give them a shout out real quick. And I'll tell that story in a moment. Cannabis. People should check him out. Makes good reviews and good content. While I was at Benzinga, they gave me some like prototype of a rosin pen. Again, I don't know what it was, but I can tell you for certain it was fucking awesome. To your point, because like I don't get me wrong, like I will, like you said, off the hip joint smoker. But if I'm going somewhere where I'd like to be like a little bit, for lack of better words, respectful, but still consume, I will get a vape pen. But like you said, it always feels like a diet weed. Like it doesn't feel like a joint. Like it's just a different high. And it's not a bad thing. It just feels like a more clear-headed high, if you will, where when you smoke a joint, man, it's like you get the whole experience. Like I don't know how to say it any other way. But when I was vaping this pen rather, um, I was like, man, this is really awesome. It wasn't harsh. It tasted good, and it had like the experience that I expect from it. I don't want to go so far as to say a joint, but it was because I almost feel like it was almost its own unique experience.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's what I'm leaning towards too. It's like, to your point, when you smoke a joint, you're going to have, you have 500 molecules interacting with each other that are creating something very, very special and very unique to that cultivar, to that grower, to that batch. And that's a great thing to experience. I love cracking the weed up. I like breaking it up with my fingers. I don't even use a grinder half the time, and twisting. And that part of that ritual for me is really important. It sounds like you enjoy that too. For me, the rosin vape was the high was okay, right? But it was what I was attracted to was the flavor, and just like, to me, it's just a flavor you cannot achieve through flower. You're gonna have, because there's 500 molecules in it, you're gonna have things that don't enhance the flavor, right? And in rosin, you're stripping all that away and getting straight to those components. I think the biggest challenge for vapes right now, and when they do this, I think it's going to be really disruptive. But there are vapes that you can put live resin in now that give you a smoking experience. That one part of the experience is more enjoyable than smoking smoke. Like there is and this is very unique, right? I'm not saying this is like take it with a grain of salt, because it's going to be hard to find these products in the market. But I know, because I've tested 40 or 50 vapes in the last few months, that there are vapes there that produce clouds that are so enjoyable to blow the cloud that's the whole, like you'll keep hitting it over and over again. And they're still not quite producing a flower like high, but it's just so enjoyable to blow this smooth smoke that doesn't hurt your throat at all. That's really great, right? Now, unfortunately for rosin, because rosin has a different molecular structure than live resin does, live resin can be, you can control the temperature in a way with the solvent in live resin that removes all the fats and lipids from your final product. And you can't quite do that with sorry, that's live resin. You can't quite do that with rosin, right? With rosin, you're mainly using mechanical filtering to remove fats and lipids. You're not using winterization to do it. So you're not using temperature. And because of that, you're just relying on filters to take out the fats and lipids right now, but you can't filter it so much that the cannabinoids and terpenes don't push through those filters. So you're going to have that's why rosin, like potency percentages, are not up there at the same levels as BHO most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Labs are iffy, but that's another topic. But because of that, they can't, your atomizer style, your temperature duration has to be a little bit, and your tank size has to be more conservative for rosin today. So most rosin vapes, unfortunately, are going to come in the best size is 0.5 gram. Recommend buying them in 0.5 gram now, because the fat and lipid component could start to burn a little bit in the atomizer, and that's where you start to get that burnt tire flavor, a little rubberized flavor.
Yeah.
Not great. And because the temperature has to be dialed back a little bit and the resistance has to be changed, you can't get that same cloud that you can get from certain vapes. So but when they dial that, when you have the flavor from rosin like you were getting and like I've experienced, and then you get the cloud, which was not going to take more than another 12 months for that tech to probably to be here and ready to go. But it's going to take another 12 months for companies to actually find it and drop it.
By that, do you mean, just real quick, because that is part of my experience. I noticed like the first hit, like you had to like kind of puff on it for a second. Like it's like maybe it was just that unit. Is that what you meant by the clouds not there? Or what did you mean?
The cloud, I mean the actual smoke, but I think what you're saying is you had to kind
It's
of
almost
get
like I had to like prime it, like kind of get it a little warmed up a little. I don't know.
yeah,
It wasn't bad. It just was a thing I learned about it, you know?
yeah, I think that's it. Every vape has got a slight nuance, and your subconscious is just going to get programmed on how to get the best experience
Hmm.
from it.
Yeah.
Other innovations that are helping with that too, right? Is like we've gone largely to buttonless vapes and buttonless AIOs that
True.
are draw to pull, right?
Right.
And the reason for that is the original buttons were just super confusing, right? It's like, press it 3 times for a random color light that is a random temperature, right?
Yeah.
So you
And
just
it's all
didn't.
different for
Yeah,
every fucking vape. It's like, what does this
exactly.
color mean for this one? I would like keep the little like piece of paper for my vape battery when I got it so I could remember like, oh, on this one, green means it's the lowest, but on this one, blue is the lowest. And it's like,
Exactly. I mean, the originals, it was like red was the lowest. You're like red and
yeah,
like
red seems like it should be
high.
hot. Yeah. Yeah.
So Yeah, so it was so confusing that it was kind of like the Apple model, right? Like, do you want to give people features that are that aren't really benefiting them? They're confusing them more than they're benefiting. So we pulled those features to make the experience simpler, but they're now adding screens to AIOs at an affordable price. And the button makes sense now because when you press it 3 times, it says high or low, not just a random color. And that gives you, when you have a button, you get a preheat feature with a lot of them. So, you can press it a couple of times, you can get that initial 6 seconds of heat up to perfect that prime for you. But to your point, different oils have different consistencies, different viscosities, different molecular weight, there's a lot of things that are different in the chemistry from oil to oil. So there's going to be a little bit of nuance from vape to vape, from distillates the thickest, hard, distillates like a rock almost at room temperature, depending on how pure it is. It's going to be, depending on the company and how much terps they add back to it, that's going to change that viscosity. There is a thickness to rosin, but it's from lipids more so than it's from the actual cannabinoid fraction. So that's going to change how it flows through the vape and what temperature it works at the best. And then live resin is probably your smoothest, most consistent oil right now. That's somewhere in between those two. So it flows through the vape the best. But rosin's still probably providing your best flavor, and it really is strain dependent. So if this is something, that your listeners are interested in, they probably know it already, but it's about finding the company that makes the best oil out of the best strains and then uses the best hardware. And that's where you're going to get your best experience. And to me, it's definitely worth, 10, $20 more for a vape that delivers versus a cheaper one that doesn't, or a vape that's using, all botanical terpenes cut at 10%. Like, there's just, look at the companies hard that you're buying product from, because even in the legal space, there is a spectrum of quality that has a pretty wide range in all areas and all products, but especially in vapes. I would tend to look for those purer products like live resin, and of course live resin, you got to also know the company's actually making live resin and not just putting a
Right.
company's live hemp terpenes into distillate and calling it live resin. There's a lot of that going on out there. It's not a defined term, it's not a legal term, but the best way to protect yourself there is to just really get to know and understand the companies you want to buy from. What's their ethos and how are they making products? Do they talk about it? Are they transparent? And then, stick with them and, support that, because that's what's gonna help the entire industry elevate.
Yeah. What do you think? I had this conversation with, I don't know if you even know who this person is, Kyle Baker. I wanted to say it so that people can look up on the website if they want to look it up and see the interview. Um, we didn't necessarily discuss this, although we did compare the regulations between states on cultivation. We were just kind of talking about how cultivation regulations compare from state to state. And I'm curious, what do you think would or does anything need to be done to make it so that the products are better? I've gotten a sense that and I'm not saying there aren't good products, right? Revolution, actually, the former company you worked with, is pretty well known for having some of the best products, I would say. So I'm not saying you can't find good products on the market, but I've just there's easy things, right? The idea of deli style versus the prepackaged model. But I'm really talking about he gave this analogy with regard to the moisture of cannabis. He was uh, when you go to restaurants and you buy a steak or eggs, depending on how you buy it, there might be an asterisk, or order it rather. There might be an asterisk that says hey, just so you know, if you're consuming this, there may be a chance that you could get foodborne illness or whatever because you're cooking it just a little bit. And the analogy he made was on one hand, he understands why we're selling cannabis. If we're selling cannabis as CPG, you got to have those moisture levels low. But he's on the other hand, there's got to be some sort of avenue so that you can sell like sticky, moist cannabis. And it's not even about stickiness. It's like, I just feel like sometimes weed I get even in Michigan and just Colorado, especially, and Illinois, it's just so fucking dry, compared to like, and maybe we're privileged from our home grow. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
definitely. Yeah.
But like, do you have any ideas with regard to that? Like what?
You should grow weed at home.
Yeah,
But yeah, man, I've got a ton of ideas, I mean, it's there's a sweet spot in weed, right? Like where you have safety and you have quality.
yeah,
It's a very narrow sweet spot. And there's a lot of issues affecting that, right? Like what mandatory testing has brought about for mold and mycotoxins is an unfortunate need for many companies to have a kill step. Kill step is like pasteurization of weed, right? And like we don't
right.
know if that's going to be mandatory in the future, but what like, and I have conversations with a lot of these companies, and I'm not opposed to a kill step, especially on industrial cannabis. I think when you start to get away from knowing your grower, you start to buying, like you have all these people involved in the supply chain. You're not like grower to consumer, which is, by the way, how it should be.
Yeah,
Like you should know your grower. You should be able to order on the computer directly from your grower, so you have control and knowledge over the decision you're making for what you're putting in your body. I'm a firm believer in that on anything you put in your body.
right.
But unfortunately, we live in an industrial world. Convenience is key, and what that means is that there's just a lot of people that are going to be touching your product. Um, so we have to develop, I think, a federal standard. I think that's key, right? Federal testing requirements, federal labeling requirements, but that's going to make it easier to bring weed over state lines, do a lot of other, do feel good about who you're buying from in every market, right? And there's a lot of markets I still would not buy from the legal market just because I know how they're regulated and I know what people do behind the scenes when there's not checks and balances there. So when it comes to moisture, there's two key components, right? Water activity and moisture content. And everything that ever goes into a box is regulated, and it has to be at a safe moisture content to prevent mold, a safe water activity. Now, this water activity and moisture content is still very much within the sticky range. Like I'm
Yep.
shocked sometimes at how high the moisture content can be and have the water activity, which actually is the determinant of mold growth or not, be at a safe level. You're actually trying to bring that, you don't feel good about selling it at that high of a level of water activity. So I do believe there's a sweet spot, and it's just I think that's a portion of the process that I love to work on, by the way, and help companies with, of post-harvest processing to really be able to dial in good product that does not need to be irradiated or have a kill step. And the reason you don't want a kill step, if you can avoid it, isn't just that it may be degrading depending on, you're using ozone. Some people are using radiation, basically like microwaving the weed. Microwaves will kill mold, right, for little
Mhm.
short spurts. There's obviously going to be some effects to quality there, but I think what a lot of these companies that make these products don't understand is just moving your weed degrades it, right? So
Right.
when you're a purist, right, artisanal weed is not about the name of your license, right? It's not about like, it's about what you actually do in your building. It's not about the size of your scale. It's about your dedication to quality. And when you're trying to produce the very best, you want to touch the weed the least. So you're going to harvest it. You're going to, I dry everything on the vine for a reason. If you buck your product or wet trim it and dry it on a rack, that is literally gravity is going to make one side of your weed flat. It's much more likely to mold when it's on a rack. So there's all these quality steps that not only make weed better, but they actually make it safer and cleaner too. And so you just have to know the process, right? And there's a lot of people growing that haven't mastered every process right now. So we dry it on the vine. Do we dry it at 60 and 60? No, because 60 and 60 is just what one group put out there as the best way to dry, right? No, there's a scientific methodology to the exact right temperature, to the exact right humidity at any stage of the drying process, and it changes on the daily. And it's going to dry your bud in a safe way that doesn't mean it needs to be irradiated. A lot of people dry in 60 and 60 slowed their dry down too much. And now they have to microwave their weed. A lot of people that grew with, really high humidity because that's what they were told to do are now having to irradiate their weed, right? But really it's about just perfecting the culture, the environment, the cultural practices. And then you can have results that don't require the kill step that's removing some of that moisture. You're moving your weed around. And then they have to dial in their precision drying. And I can tell you what, it's hard when you're designing a building to build the right kind of dry that can be there's the difference in dry rooms are like one is a closet with very little control. It's kind of like a school bus, right? And then one is got precise control and it's a lot more like a Ferrari. And so, then you got to have a Ferrari driver, somebody who thinks like the plant, that thinks about, they can actually think about how the moisture is moving in and out of the plant, how mold grows. They're keeping all those variables in mind. And then you then you get the product to where it needs to be, and then you got to put it in the right package too. And that's a big product. Like most of these everybody wants glass jars, but weed's better in Mylar. Why is it better in Mylar? Because it's airtight. The jars aren't airtight. Yeah. It's just the only reason we're using glass jars right now is, for one, I'm a believer that glass is the best thing to keep your weed in. When you have the right jars, a mason jar, they're airtight, right? Like, and then airtight, yeah. Good. But when you start to get into these little 8s, they have a lot of surface area. Some of that moisture is getting lost. We actually went to, in my opinion, when Revolution made that switch from the perfect container to glass, there was a quality loss going to glass. But if you were to go back, you get trolled so hard by everybody that thinks your weed should be in glass, right? So it's kind of like you're really bouncing like what customers want, the loudest customers out there, and you can get trolled into making something that's less quality. Just so that does happen. Like the market works against itself sometimes. And some trust needs to be given to some of the tenured, legacy operators that really do know how to deliver a great product. But I think, we're working to solve those problems too. That's one thing Anthropologist does as well. We don't just work with cultivators. We'll also work with packaging producers. What does the market? Is there white space in packaging? 100%. We need glass that's shaped like a bud, not like like I want to be able to put 1/8 of big buds in a jar. Right. And you can't do it in a little short jar. That's not how weed's shaped, right? So we need taller, thinner, less surface area, few innovations on jars, maybe one that has like, that you can actually change the amount of air volume in the jar to protect it, just because every strain has a slightly different structure, a slightly different amount of fluffiness or density that's going to change how much volume it takes up in the jar. So what the customer ends up getting is a jar that's 1/3 full of weed, and that's not that exciting, right? Like that's like, shit, I got gypped. Well, no, you just got dense weed. That's not a horrible thing to have dense weed, but I like my weed somewhere between dense and fluffy personally, But if you had a jar that could deal with those batch fluctuations, so there's still so much to innovate in.
Do you think like it sounds like you were saying like Illinois do you think it is the sweet spot, or do you think, like I say, is it a bit too strict? Like I actually, before I give you the space to answer that, I thought one of the things you said that really made me think was like, maybe for like a large scale, like, yeah, we gotta have stricter, but I it's kind of in line with the idea of getting like eggs over easy or a medium rare steak. I wonder if like smaller operators could be allowed like a little bit of slack, if you will, but I guess my question was really, are they okay? Are the testing regulations, just to pick on Illinois since that's where I'm from, do you think they need to be modified in any sort of way to make it easier to make quality product?
I don't think the test results are preventing quality product. So there's just, I don't, in any way, shape, or form. I think that I hear people, I just know because I passed 99% of mold testing
Mm-hmm.
without. So I think we can look at that, and I think we should always be addressing, like, because the fact is like, there's discrepancies from lab to lab. The lab testing needs to be standardized. That's one thing most people don't understand out there, is that, if you're comparing two companies and they're tested in different labs, the lab results don't mean anything. You got to smoke the bud. One lab may naturally test lower than the other lab. They just always show up 2 or 3 or 4 points lower. I purposely chose to go with the lower testing lab in Illinois because I thought it probably had the most integrity, and they certainly had the longest tenure track record. But I think that I like your question, right? Like I don't necessarily think there should be different markets but there's one market that I'm interested in that doesn't exist, right? Like, I think we need to do something on the small business side to make it easier for small businesses. But the things that don't make any sense are the security and compliance measures that you have to put up. That's what costs the money. That does not help customers get better quality. It's not helping anybody, right? Like, especially while other states are backdooring, 90% of what gets produced in the state, Illinois is completely trapped. There's not saying Illinois should be able to backdoor. There's no reason for it, but they're not preventing that from coming into this state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're competing with zero with very low regulations in a highly regulated market, and you got to figure out how to take the cuffs off in some way that makes it easier to produce. It makes it easier for customers to buy weed too, I think. And in a perfect world, Cole, what I like to see is like not at a craft level, but at a more of a micro level. I think there should be a micro license. I think the only way you kill the majority of people people are going to grow weed. And it's become too easy. It's too expensive to buy it for a lot of people for how much they want to consume. So people are going to grow it. So let them grow it and give them an opportunity to get good at it and to commercialize it through a micro license and I think every state should start off with only micro licenses, frankly.
Yeah.
And that people should earn the right to scale up because you've proven you can actually do what you like. There is no, like, this competitive licensing process was good, but what it really meant is that people really good at writing applications got licenses, not people really good at growing weed, right? And granted that people really good at writing applications are probably really good at standing up business too.
Sure.
Or they have the skill set to do it, the skill set to raise capital, a lot of skills that you need. But there's one skill that could be missing. And people that don't have those same advantages, all people, this is where we get into real social equity, right? Like, it's all people that don't have the same advantages as the rich or the same connections as the Ivy League, that they have a shot too, because, they probably have the passion. They probably have the love for weed. They're willing to go out and get their own education on it to grow it, and they need a chance to start up. And I think that, like, having like a micro direct to consumer model is the goal. Like, I mean, that would be the business I would love to run, right? Like, I want to grow like, 5,000 square feet and send it through the mail to your house. You order it and that's it. So very low overhead, so I can put all the cash flow back into quality. And that's what it takes to get good quality.
Right.
You have to 5 years, your lights expire. Lights are expensive. Your HVACs break. You're dealing with issues every day, and you've got very little gas in the tank to take care of those issues. Quality goes down, and pretty soon you start microwaving weed.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to breeze over one of the points I started with, but what do you think about something simple like to extend your point a little bit, like a small scale, did you call it like a peddler's license, or what do you call it? Like a small
Micro
license. There you go. I was just trying to make sure I used the right words. Something like that. Do you think also, like, kind of allowing people to serve deli style would be more conducive to like a better shopping experience. Like I just think about the way that I used to purchase cannabis,
Yeah.
and I still to this day, you just have to kind of work with the system, if you will. But it was more so, I feel like when you could only acquire it from the traditional market. I remember I would have friends that would have like multiple options. I'd look at each of them, like just like I do with any other product produce I buy, and I have like um a checklist, like a mental checklist, not only for strawberries and grapes and apples and bananas, but for cannabis. And I feel like that sort of shopping experience where you pick it out and you weigh it out and bag it yourself, even sometimes, is really conducive to like a good shopping experience. What do you think about that idea?
I mean, I think there's pros and cons, right? Like, and there's huge pros and cons, and I think it's great to be able to stick your nose in a jar, smell weed, interact with the product.
And one thing I want to say really quick, because one thing people always say when I propose this idea, they're like, I feel weird when I go into a weed shop and like somebody's got their face buried in a jar. I think that's like a bad protocol. You got to have like a sample jar, and then you have like the stuff you actually grab from. Didn't mean to cut off your point, but I just wanted to make sure to like put that in there.
But that's exactly it, right? I think there's all these like little nuances that you can work with in order to, if customers like it, they like deli style, right? Um, it's really hard on the bud quality deli style. It's really hard doing inventory. My first store was deli style. And I did about 50-50 pre-pack, 50-50 deli style.
And one
Um,
thing I just wanted to extend your point, maybe to color it in for people, and maybe you could add something really quick. I had learned, honestly, when I first started doing the Chillinois podcast, I went to some like random cannabis conference, and they were talking about deli style versus prepackaged. And one of the things they were saying is like, you might buy a pound from somebody, but by the time you get it back to the shop and start bagging it into your eighths and whatever, first of all, just bringing it back to the shop, it may not even be a pound anymore because some of it has gone like airborne. And then like then the packaging process in and of itself, like it's not like a pound equals a pound sold is the point that they made, you know?
I had to explain. Okay, so when we first went to market in Illinois, right, we're the first CPG market, and
Mhm.
I've been thinking about CPG for about 5 years because when you're thinking about actual regulated product and quality control, you're like, dude, if like, it's so you're making me count my plants and then letting me sell the weed deli style, and it's drying out every day. There's no inventory control there, right? So if you have a regulated product that needs tight inventory control, right, it's tricky. You do see deli style to tobacco. You don't see deli style alcohol, right? So I think that it's just from a regulatory perspective, we have to figure out what the goal is, right? Like what is
I
the
think the
ultimate,
closest thing you see to deli style alcohol is those cool tap houses you go to nowadays.
like
But that's,
the wine houses and
yeah,
shit.
but
Yeah.
that's, you know,
And we need those for weed too. Like they're like
that
these
would be cool.
consumption lounges are a fucking joke because you can't buy weed there. Like I would love to have a consultant like a lounge that's just like a joint lounge where you come and have professional pre-roll crew and you buy a $70
Yeah,
pre-roll.
a dab bar.
Yeah, it can twist it all up and create these amazing experiences. But that's another podcast. So,
Yeah,
but
a dab bar, stuff like that, you know.
100%. Yeah, dude. Anything you could do, and you
Right.
could just start to make. You can make we can make water solubles and make live drinks on the spot. Like whatever it is, it just needs to be fun and interactive, like a bar. Consumption lounges aren't going to work until you can buy at least what you're going to consume on site there,
Mhm.
and then they're going to be really, really cool. We just have to get over that hump of allowing sales to be elsewhere. Nobody wants to buy weed and then go somewhere else to smoke it, right? It's odd. It's a great place to party, but it's not a regular stop on my, like, but if there was a coffee shop where I could go sit down in the morning, order a coffee, roll a doobie, smoke it there and read the paper, that would
Yeah.
be
No, I
that'd be
mean, there's one place in Illinois that's like sort of close to that, and I wish there were more. This is the only reason I'm really saying it right now. It's called Molly's Joint in Tilton, Illinois. The 1937 group is behind it. And yeah, it's just a cool place because not only is it a restaurant, a bar, a gaming lounge, but there's a consumption lounge and a dispensary. It's kind of like a mall, you know. So it's like you don't they're not the same businesses, but you don't have to like you said, you don't want to buy weed and then have to drive somewhere else. You can buy the weed there or you bring your own, which is super cool. And consume, get a sandwich brought in to the consumption lounge, it's like pretty cool.
It's the way yeah, I've been hearing a lot about it, man. Especially from you. Like I think you promote it a lot. That's cool. I need to get out there. Where is it?
Tilton, Illinois, so it's like eastern Illinois, sort of towards Danville, if you know where Danville is.
So getting my bearings after 10 years.
Yeah, it's pretty cool though. Like I say, it's kind of a unique location. I think the closest thing that I've seen to it is I don't know what it's going to be called now because it just sold, but OK Dispensaries. Like they have the bakeries and the dispensary on the same, and the bakery, the dispensary, and the consumption lounge on the same property, which I just think is a really cool combination. And shout out to the people behind that because that were behind it. Scott and Almar Pol. I can't remember their names right now, but they're both super cool.
Obviously, I mean, super dope concept. They seem like proper stoners, That's really cool. When we get back to deli style,
Yes.
I think that it's I mean, the operational workflow of doing deli style.
Hmm.
Imagine you got 30 jars and you've got to weigh every single jar in the morning, put the weight in the system, weigh every jar at the end of the night, put the weight in the system and recheck it because there's always that diversion. So you're going to have you're going to be doing a lot of inventory. It's like a bar that's really, really well managed. It's going to weigh its liquor bottles every night, right? You're going to be doing that every day. So I think another downside people don't think of, and just inventory control, quality control, those all become hard. But to your point too, like a pound's not a pound, right? And when Illinois first started, people asked me people were like, how much for a quarter pound? How much for a pound? I was like, no, I sell eights. They were like, what do you mean? I was like, well, this is a package eight. This isn't a pound of weed, right? I had to grow 3 pounds to get you this 1 pound of eights right here, because that's all the product that can form. We're quality controlling for the first time ever in cannabis. So you're buying a quality control product. Now, different companies are, like this was a problem that was happening really bad in Colorado, right? You'd go and you'd buy a pre-packed eighth, and it would be completely different the next time you bought the same strain in a pre-packed eighth. Like one strain, one day it might be all high quality buds. Come back a week later, they're literally selling you stems and seeds stems and like trim in the same jar. And that's too big of a quality discrepancy to
Yeah.
be consumer packaged good, or you have to have standards of quality. And to that point, right? I think people don't realize that like that's the cost that goes on a CPG market, and why weed costs more is there's a cost of quality, of separating that strain into multiple different product offerings, right? First step we did to quality control is we removed the popcorn. Most companies just put it all in one. They had 70% goes into eights, all the popcorn, all the regular bud, and all your jars are going to be a little bit different. So we removed popcorn because that's going to keep things more consistent. We sell you the popcorn at a cheaper price, right? Like that was the first goal. Now that's an industry standard. Everybody does that. The second is your trim and or your non-conforming ugly bud, right? So you have to have a use for that. And when a dispensary buys that product, they might not be allowed to process any of that. So it might just be simple as, look, I'm going to put the jar out and for the first 2 weeks, it's this price. For the second two, it just the quality goes down until you get to that. But, you're going to have a quarter pound of shake out of a pound of bud by the time you get to the end of it. If you're opening the jar up every day, weighing it every day, processing it, handling it over and over again, it just really degrades the material. So you get precision use of biomass in full CPG. There is a benefit to bulk sales for the grower too, though. That's amazing because you can now just focus on growing weed and not being a product manager, having a whole packaging team, all you have to do is trim it, bag it, lightly sort it into quality, make sure it's pretty good going out the door, and seal it up in 1 pound bags. That takes 10% of the post-harvest employees that actually running a full CPG company does. And it's an enormous, and I think that's something funny, right? Like we didn't get into hemp today, and we probably don't have time, and we'd love to talk about that more in the future, but hemp has got both sides to it, right? It's got like probably the best manufacturing people in the whole cannabis industry existing in hemp right now, right? Because cannabis was built on growers and lawyers and real estate agents, but that manufacturing portion, that middle portion, is secondary, right? You grow the weed first, then you manufacture it into products. And so that's the part that I think is really, really burdensome. It's really not cost effective to do in weed, in legal THC weed,
Yeah.
because the scale is only within state lines, and the
To your
scale is only for your canopy you're growing. And this, so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I cut you off. I was just gonna say to your point, to that exact point, I had Adam Terry on the show in the past. He was in Massachusetts and he was explaining, and I'm sure you're gonna agree with this, like cannabis drinks haven't really gotten good until hemp because it was that scale that they needed. I feel like that's the perfect point for, you know.
I think that is a good point. I think that there are other reasons, right? Like I laughed at cannabis drinks a few years ago because coming out of Colorado early on, we've watched them collect dust. And
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, and to that point, the problem with the drinks was the economics.
Hmm.
It's still, the economics are still a huge issue today, frankly. I mean, when you're looking at a 6-pack of beer, if you're at a liquor store, a 6-pack of beer is $4.99, a 6-pack of 10 milligram hemp drinks is $49.99.
Right. Right.
There's economic problems there. But it's even worse when you go in state lines and you can't set up a line that's going to produce, mass produce these products. The cost is even higher. And the biggest issue for drinks early on was the dosing and the price point. None of it added up, right? Like you can have 100 milligram drinks and charge $20 for them, and that makes sense for a small batch company to make. But no customer wants a 100 milligram drink. A few do, right? A few you probably do, and a few other people do. The people, people with really high liver metabolism need it. People with really high tolerance might need it. But you're ruling out about 90% of the market at the 100 milligram drink and making it way too complicated to dose from drinks.
Yeah.
The reason gummies took off is dosing simple, right? Gummies are good. Gummies have always existed, right? But knowing that you get exactly 10 milligram, it takes you 5 seconds to chew it up. It's like, that is the consistency that you need in dosing edibles to make sure your experience is good. That wasn't in drinks. So we had this huge discrepancy between dose and price point forever, right? Where it was like, oh, I can get a Bubba Kush root beer for $12 for 10 milligram. And then I got to drink 12 ounces of liquid to get 10 milligrams in me. And I'm out $12 for that one, so I think that scale gives you the economics to make the dose make sense. But I really think where drinks have taken off is in the South. It's in markets where it's when we can bring them to the occasion, right?
Right.
So, like if you can't get legal weed and you can buy drinks,
Oh man.
you finally have an experience with weed, right? You have something that replaces smoking it, or something that kind of ritualizes it a little bit, in a great alternative. So the timing of also a health and wellness movement with people moving away from alcohol and looking for, and having the alternative available to them in a liquor store. And the liquor store is happy to host the product because it's a great value for their square footage. They're charging a lot for they can charge $49.99 versus $5.99. That's a way better product to stock if it has velocity. So everybody's winning now. People that don't have access are getting access. People that want to stop drinking alcohol are having access. Liquor stores are making more money per square foot. Like it's a win-win for everybody in these markets. And finally, I see this huge future of drinks because of the nascent markets where they're getting early penetration. People are creating a culture around them, and that's wonderful to see because they're finally taking off, and
Yeah.
in the place, right? They don't belong in dispensaries. People don't walk into a dispo to buy a lot of shit. Like they walk into a dispo to buy THC, to buy usually something they smoke, to buy, pretty good potent edibles and gummies, they'll buy those there. But for the lower potency stuff and, drinks and things like that, like they just need to be they're convenience items. They need to be readily available for people. They need to be, in age gated establishments and, easier to find and buy. But, at least
Yeah.
liquor stores, if not convenience stores. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree on all those things. Like what's funny right now with the cannabis drinks, it always it's not, this isn't the right way to describe it. I was gonna say it almost feels naughty when you're sitting there drinking a cannabis drink, but what I realize actually is that what I'm feeling is almost like liberation, and that's not even the right word still, but it's like some people might say I need to find new friends, and I'm joking when I say that, but sometimes you're around a crowd of people that doesn't want to smoke, and they're drinking, and we're inside, and maybe also there is a kid around because you start to get older, like people have families and stuff, and so they don't want you smoking around people. Everybody just isn't into that. And so the fact that you can consume and have a drink, it's like I'm so used to being like, oh, I'll be back in 15 minutes. And now I'm sitting here consuming with the family or with my friends. Um and I don't know, it's like this cool feeling and maybe the novelty will wear off. I hope not though. It's just like a last Thanksgiving, I was drinking cannabis drinks and nobody said anything. I wasn't disturbing anybody. Everybody had their own drinks, some water, some alcoholic, some whatever. But yeah, like it's just that it's a really cool mode that, like you said, if you would have asked me even 2 years ago, like, Cole, do you drink cannabis drinks a lot? Like, hell no. And I tried. It's not that I didn't try. Like, I loved the idea of not having to like eat a whole chocolate bar or something. Cause like you said, I am a little bit more of a high dose person. So I was like, all right, well, I can drink a whole drink. That'll be easy. But they just weren't good. And even some of the early ones like would hurt my stomach. And now these new ones, like, I don't know, the nano emulsion, I think it is. It just, man, it kicks in quick. I feel like it's perfect for people. You kind of already said this, but like the reason gummies got so popular, like you said, because it's like that low dose, people knew what to expect. And I feel like that's what they're getting out of some of these drinks nowadays when they're like 5 or 10 milligrams, because they can sip on them. That's something they're used to, like culturally with alcohol, and they know how to like titrate their dose sort of naturally as a result of that, like low and slow, you know?
yeah, no, it becomes like the perfect like 5 o'clock ritual, like when I get home, I crack this 5 milligrams, I drink it before dinner, it kicks in my appetite, I'm relaxed with the kids. Like you could really see it fitting into your day now. And there are really, to your point, really good, much better products that are coming out now. And I had, very similar experiences with a lot of, I would drink weed, but because we made syrup, right? Which is,
Sure.
I think, an astounding product. And the reason I love it is because it's got some real sugar in it, minimal, it's a sugar based drink, but you can mix it with anything. And the other
Right.
thing I found is really cool, and I'm not an alcohol consumer, a big one anyway, especially being from Texas. But I do enjoy like, good tequila in small amounts. I do enjoy, a good margarita. I do enjoy a cocktail when I'm grilling on a summer night. And I've always been one, I say I'm not a big alcohol drinker, but I've always been one that craves the second drink. And after the second drink, I crave the third drink, right? I'm like, I just, that was delicious. But what I found, and I don't think that this is taken off enough yet, is that when if I would use syrup as the simple syrup in a margarita mix, right? That I only wanted one. I never wanted that second drink.
Yeah.
It's all about the vibe of having a little bit of alcohol in the system, the right amount of weed in the system, and like you get to this level where you're like, I don't need to improve this state. This
Hmm.
is it. This is exactly what this is what I'm going for. So, I love them for that reason too, for their ability to actually, I think that it's not just like stopping to drink alcohol or a complete alternative, but a modulator to alcohol.
Yeah.
And then we've always heard that too, like early on, right? Like in the pilot program where people were having a lot of success modulating opioids with CBD, right? Like if I can take half the opioids if I eat, 100 milligrams of CBD at the same time. And by the way, that's a grain of salt. don't, not recommending anybody try that, but, or if but I do think I would personally, I can't eat opioids at all, but I would rather eat THC than opiates. And if I can take something that's going to mean that I have to take less drugs or less alcohol because I'm using something natural, that's really, really cool and probably ultimately beneficial to people. Of course, this is, anecdotal at best, but I don't, I don't see how it could hurt to keep people from, getting so intoxicated that they get in car accidents or, do add the other negative stuff that can come with that third, fourth, fifth drink.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you on that. Well, we kind of went off on a tangent, and I know we've been going for quite a while, so we can start to wrap. But I think we had a good discussion about like testing standards. One thing I just want to say is, I agree with you. I think that oversight is going to make the whole testing situation better. Like I just read in MJ Biz Daily that several states, including Illinois, which I've written about on my website if people want to check it out, are creating like oversight laboratories as a standard practice, basically just because like, again, not that there aren't some good, solid third-party operators out there, but there just have been reports of, inflation, lab shopping, and, that doesn't sound like, in other words, like that. Well, let's just put it shortly. Yeah, that doesn't sound good when people like say that about testing, because it is, like you said, it's supposed to be the foundation of legalization. So, yeah, I do hope that like at least that will be a good step towards addressing some of the issues that exist, with testing, having a state oversight.
I would agree. Lab regulation, lab accountability is enormous, right? We've been seeing it happen for years, and frankly, people win with the higher test result on the jar. So there's incentive there to inflate. I don't know what happens behind the scenes. I, obviously prefer to market product by its cleanliness, its approach to cultivation, other things other than potency. But when potency is driving sales, the labs that are producing higher potency tend to get more business. Right. So and so how do you regulate that? Well, there's a few things, one, having a check and balance lab, we are always supposed to have that in Illinois. It just never got up and running. So hopefully they're gonna do that. That's 9 years later, right? Time to establish
Yeah.
that lab. But more so it's establishing standardized process, because it shifts in the process is the way that you prep the sample needs to be the same in every lab. There shouldn't be one sample prep in one lab and another sample prep in another lab. The way you procure the sample needs to be standardized. The type of machine, the length of time you run the machine through, and the standards that you buy. The standards are like, I'm trying to think of an analogy for it, but they're like the weights and measures, right? So if you're gonna, adjust the weight of a scale, you need a standardized weight to calibrate that weight to.
Right.
So there's standards for cannabinoids, and you can get those from multiple sources. Well, every source is going to be a little different. So there's only should be one source for standards. There's work going on in the ASTM too, and I was on that panel for a while. I didn't go to many meetings because they bored me to death. But
What is that?
ASTM is the basically National Standards Association.
Oh.
So they set the standards for all different industries. You want to be up to ASTM standards. We don't have those for cannabis lab testing, which means that it's a lot of the way that THCA hemp exists, right? They can turn down the machine so it tests a little bit lower. That's the danger of THCA hemp, because if the machine's not turned down, and when the cops test the customer that have it, the customer's now in jail for buying something that was pseudo legally sold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes back to that. Like there will be no real legal hemp until you have standardized testing that can actually determine whether something's hemp or not. So I think that, yeah, that's imperative, is to have fair and equal lab testing, without a doubt. I think that I don't know how lab testing. I've heard some things about how lab testing could be negatively affecting quality. Like there's a lot of people that complain that mycotoxin levels, mold levels are too low, and that their safety standards could be pushed up higher. And then that would mean that multiple companies wouldn't have to irradiate. But I can tell you that in Colorado, they're 10 times higher, and 85% of that market irradiates still. So I don't know, right? Whereas I know that I was able to pass 99% of the standards here at a much higher standard than Colorado, so they can be passed when the right protocols are put in place. And so I don't, I don't know if the problem is irradiation that's lower quality, or the problem is the cultural practices that are happening in companies that are leading to the need to irradiate. I don't know if that's because the lab standards are too high or not, but I do know that what I always do, growing weed's easy. You grow weed. It's easy to do, but you have to do the basics right 100% of the time to grow really, really good weed that's clean of anything. And you still could fail a mold test because mold is naturally in the air, and your products naturally, has moisture to it where mold likes to grow. So you have to do everything right. You've got to have great airflow. You've got to have a great environment. You've got to have a great day that's daytime and nighttime. You've got to prune your plants on time. You've got to make sure that the rooms are sterilized in the right way. You have to make sure that the finishing containers are done the right way. Drying and curing is done correctly. And when all these things are done right, it's quite possible to pass. But the level of companies, or the amount of companies that don't have to do this, is accounting for about 10 to 15% of the canopy in every market, right? We're talking California, 85% irradiated. Colorado, 85% irradiated. Illinois, 85% irradiated. Michigan, 85% irradiated. So every state has got what I would say in issues. And the issues, a lot of them are in the economics of the market, right? It's overly competitive. Price compression's forcing quality down. It's forcing people to cut corners. When you cut corners, you have to irradiate. When you don't cut corners, you don't have to irradiate. And that is, we can hop back on and talk about numerous other ways that we could solve these issues, but it's, responsible canopy licensing is huge for quality. Everybody's like, no, it should be unlimited canopy, then we'll get real competition. Well, if price is all that matters to you, then that is important, right? And you should have enough canopy to where price can be a spectrum of pricing based on quality. So you can get, the same quality at that low price, low quality. But if there's so much canopy that it forces everybody to be that low quality, that's not a very attractive market, right? So,
Right.
I don't know.
Well, hey, we'll next time we get together, we'll definitely we'll have to chop up like hemp and other topics. Maybe I don't know, maybe things will have changed by the time we talk next, because people keep saying things will change with it, at least at a federal level. And I think I just saw the other day that they're not going to touch it in the upcoming farm bill, at least. But again, it just seems like that blows with the wind. I bet next week there's going to be a headline that says there's a new amendment in the farm bill that, so who knows? But I will just say between then and now, I'd love for you to let me know like what you think. And I'm also just kind of displaying this for my audience in case they missed it. A few weeks ago, well, actually a month ago exactly, I released this article with a policy write-up on how I think we can address some of the valid issues that exist with hemp. And so I'd love for you to check that out. And maybe if things haven't changed by the next time we chat, that'll be a good thing we can chat about. And I'd be curious to see like what you think about it. And audience, if you check it out, I'll have it in the show notes. Let me know what you think about it. I recently spoke about it with former cannabis regulator Shalene Title. I got a message from a cannabis regulator here in Illinois that I'm not going to name, just out of respect for them. But I'm getting some compliments on this policy proposal, and I do think that we should all come together to try to address it, because I think there are valid issues on both sides.
100%. We have to listen to each other. The one thing that's very clear from this is that neither market's perfect. Both have lots of opportunity to improve it, and the customer where they're spending their dollars is what's showing us what needs to change. So I'm eager to read that. I'll definitely give it a read. And
Yeah, to that point, that's why I call it taking the best and leaving the rest. Like, taking the best from each and then leaving the rest. And yeah, so definitely, folks, check that out. And Dusty, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me. It's been we've been chatting for quite a while about doing this. Let's make the next one happen sooner than later.
100%, 100%. It's always a pleasure, Cole. I'm a big fan, and thanks for having me on. And to you and the whole audience out there, happy holidays, and happy New Year if you watch this before the New Year.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, again, it was a pleasure to sit down with you. Once again, folks, all the links that we mentioned are in the episode description if you'd like to connect with Dustin and, well, get some consulting services, grow the best weed in the world. Hit up Dustin.
Innovation services, right?
There you go. There you go. Thank you for the clarification there. Well, folks, we'll see you on the next episode of the Cole